Welcome back to Both Sides of the Storm. I'm Brad Hayes, your host. We have an ongoing series called Experts on Appraisal. And today I have with me Mike Torgerson, the owner of AMITIGATIONS, a consulting company specializing in appraisal and teaching contractors how to navigate insurance work profitably. As a former owner of an IA firm who signed contracts with many of the major carriers, Mike brings a unique viewpoint from both sides of the insurance restoration industry. Hello, Mike, and welcome to our podcast, Both Sides of the Storm. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and again, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Good morning, Brad.
If you could start out, why don't you talk a little bit about your backstory? Tell us what what your background is and how you got into this industry. It's a very unique industry, and I'm always curious how people find their way into it.
Sure. I think mine's a little unique compared to most of the people I see on a day-to-day basis. I got into it as a general business consultant. I took on an independent adjusting firm as a client, and we were there to streamline operations, write policies, procedures, and help them with new client acquisition so that they were ready for growth. That was a pretty unique spot to start in insurance. What we ended up finding out was that there was a big disconnect between people on the street and the executives in the insurance companies and what everybody wanted. So just out of necessity, I would go interview a physical damage manager on a new account, find out what was most important to them, and then take the cliff notes and put it in our claim management system. So there's a lot of negative, I should say, opinions in first-party Facebook groups about people who, teach best practices for a living. But that's where I started in this industry. And to be fair, I didn't know any differently at the time and thought that was normal, routine business.
So let me ask you about that. When you wrote the best practices, give me an example of what that might look like, or not the whole book, obviously, but just a couple of ideas of what you might be writing.
Sure. So, for example, on an auto claim, it would be an overlay on CCC1 of what they don't pay. We don't pay to blend a quarter panel. In property, it would be, this is what you put in to remove items or what you don't, or waste factor or shingles. Literally all the complaints that I hear from my contractor clients today, it was just organizing how the carrier was going to pay and more specifically what they would.
So the best practices were not necessarily the best practices of the industry. It was their own best practices. Is that kind of right?
You're absolutely correct. Every insurance company had their own take on how they wanted us to adjust the estimating software they required to fit their guidelines. And my job was to make sure that actually got done.
Okay, so even though in the industry, people feel that you need to charge to replace ridge cap, right? Mm-hmm. An insurance carrier may say, we're not paying for ridge cap, that's part of the waste.
Correct. If you've ever called a desk adjuster and tried to argue that with them, you're not going to get real far most of the
time. Okay. So that's why some people get pretty upset with the desk adjuster. Yeah, exactly.
So, Brad, that's where I started in the industry. It's not where I am today. I'm curious to see where it's going to end up. It seems to be a winding road. However, today I am in a completely different niche of the industry. In the early years of doing IA work, we did a lot of really niche things. We did trains, drop tables, heavy equipment. One of our guys got to go into Jay Leno's garage. I mean, we saw a lot of neat things, but we solved the hardest problems for insurance companies in order to get their routine book of business. So for me, that was a good entry point. I saw a lot of different things, but we were way too heavy in auto during COVID. And if you know anything about your primary metric being miles driven, we were slow. So there was a lot of roundtables, a lot of whiteboard meetings, a lot of, hey, while we're in this unique place, what do we want to do differently? And I was doing some research and I was listening to a first-party lawyer in California talk about how he wishes there was enough money in these residential claims in order for him to pursue it. And I don't know if I'm stubborn or hard-headed. I do like to solve hard problems, but I also know when there's a blue ocean and an infinite number of opportunities, if you learn how to solve a hard problem, you can make a big difference. And usually rewards go to people who solve those kind of problems. So I got that stuck in my head and I just couldn't get it out. Everybody else wanted to finish transitioning to property and just make that the bulk of our book of business. I was done selling to insurance companies at that point. I was a little bored with it. Felt like I was selling widgets to Walmart where we always had to be a little leaner and a little faster and a little cheaper. And I was just done with that part. So I decided to wade into the other side and see if I could make a difference there.
So when you work with the carriers, now I understand that you used to have an IA firm, right? And so you signed with many major carriers. What was that side of the industry like? So when you were a vendor of an IA firm, what kind of things did you go through, or did they check up on you? Tell me how that worked.
Most of it was eyeball bleeding compliance, yeah, security audits, literally having to red test or pen test your security to make sure everything. And again, literally every insurance company had a different set of criteria. Some would have us go through an entire month-long onboarding protocol for online security. Others wouldn't even ask about that and would drill down on where we were ordering parts or how we were writing. It was not the opposite of uniform, I guess is the best way to sum it up.
Interesting. So who are your clients now?
Today, that's evolving. So my original idea was, hey, I know what an insurance company will pay. I sat in the corporate offices with hundreds of adjusters who all thanked me because I narrative told them exactly what to do. And I said, if collision centers and contractors just knew what a desk adjuster could pay and wrote that estimate, we could save so much aggravation back and forth. So that was my original shingle that I put out there. I told contractors and collision centers, if you have legitimate damage on a covered loss, I will teach you how to estimate it properly to get paid. And it worked for a long time. For years, that was a very profitable and a very easygoing business model. Unfortunately, that's just not where we're at today. I feel like insurance companies have really tightened up, but that's a little bit longer winded conversation. But it is also how I got into doing first party appraisals. I didn't set out with that intention, but I started getting referrals from other appraisers who had a conflict of interest because they represented the carrier.
So you made the comment that you knew what insurance carriers would pay, so you could help the contractors on writing an estimate or a proposal to meet those criteria. But how does an insurance carrier pay? Don't they follow industry market condition standards?
I mean, in property, it's Symbility or Xactimate. In auto, it's CCC1. And there's other programs for heavy equipment and specialty and things like that. But most of the carriers, and again, it's a tool, right? So if I have a calculator and I punch in different numbers, I'm going to get a different result than the person next to me. But the point of those tools is to try to bring some uniformity to it. And again, this is cats and dogs. There's always going to be a little bit of back and forth. They're both in business to make money. But at the end of the day, if you write a full, fair sheet and document it well, that was what I wanted to teach contractors how to do. The carriers will often take an overlay and pull things out of an estimate written by a staff or an IA. But what I would say to the contractor is, this is what's owed. Even if they pulled it out, stick to your guns, document why you need it, and stay the course.
So after a large catastrophe, the market conditions can go up faster than Xactimate can actually change their pricing schedule, right?
Correct.
So do carriers acknowledge that? Do they understand that some of those pricings, schedules are off?
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know a lot of insurance executives that are not informed, but that wasn't something I saw on a daily basis. Our primary goal is we actually tried to avoid the cat work. I did do some Louisiana cat work as my last carrier side, but we went after daily work. So we were actually the opposite of cat work. So that unique position wouldn't be something I could speak to firsthand, but based on what they knew about other parts of the industry, I would be surprised if they did.
Okay. What kind of problems do you solve for your clients?
Um, I mean, some of our previous interviews that you've done, I saw that the panels were talking about first party property or property appraisal in general, not, smaller loss is the Wild West. And I would agree firsthand that that is the case. The problem that I solve for homeowners, insureds, public adjusters, lawyers is I give you a consistent, effective, affordable, flat rate appraisal with no conflict of interest. So if you're looking to spaghetti estimate and have me go argue things that aren't legitimate, I'm not your guy. But if you want a full, complete estimate that is consistent, I know exactly what that is and I go after it every time. For contractors, it is having to evolve. Remember, originally we taught contractors how to write an estimate. I thought I invented supplementing. I didn't know anybody else was doing it, but there's a whole cottage industry around that problem. And the challenge is that supplementing is no longer effective, in my opinion. You actually have to have appraisal, PA, legal in your toolkit if you want to be effective at storm restoration. So for contractors, unfortunately, you can't be all things to them. If they need an appraiser, I can't be their supplementer, right? But if you are really good at your front end, you can send me your appraisal work. But if you're a disaster on the front end, I can help you there, but then we need to go out and help you find appropriate professionals to support you. And I realize that's a really valuable service. Most people are very bad at knowing who's an effective appraiser or PA or lawyer.
So when you're working with a contractor, sometimes you get to the point where you need to bring in a public adjuster, you need to bring in an appraiser, possibly an attorney. And what are the trigger points? When do you say, okay, now it's time for a public adjuster, or wait a minute, let's try appraisal? Talk
Yeah.
to me about that.
So somebody who just refers me appraisal, I'll get a denial with an engineer report saying there's no storm damage and a non-renewal letter. And they'll say, Mike, fix this. They think appraisal is a silver bullet. And I mean, whether I agree with if it's damaged or not, that's not an appraisal scenario. So I'll tell them, hey, you need to go back and hire a PA, right? Or suggest that the insured goes and gets representation, whether that's a PA or a lawyer. There's a lot of nuances to that, but I personally have found a competent PA can often get the ball started. And if they have a great lawyer that they're partnered with, that's a great combination to help first party get an effective result.
So appraisal is only one tool in the toolbox, so to speak. You've got to look at public adjusters. You have to look at attorneys. You have to look at experts, engineers, meteorologists. I mean, there are several professionals in this industry, that make it complete and then that can actually help somebody.
Yeah, I would tell any contractor listening to this, if you think that you're getting a fair shake just by asking nicely, at least in the markets I've been working, and I've done appraisal in multiple states over the last couple of years to really test the markets. Um, it's systematic. The estimates are short compared to what Exactimate says is owed, and contractors really need to know what to do about it.
So there are also policyholders that are listening to this podcast. What can you tell them? Now, we've been talking about contractors, but when they get these below deductible letters, when they get all, they have no idea what to do with the denial letter. Where do they go with this? Let's say they're not even working with a contractor yet. Do you recommend that maybe they go to a contractor first? That's when they get out on the phone and call an attorney or a public adjuster. What would be their first step?
Good luck. It's such a complicated sea out there. I'll give you some real world examples. I went to college in Florida. I have family there after Hurricane Ian. Actually, that's where I met you at one of the conferences there. I would tell homeowners, file your claim, find a contractor that you trust. I don't know why you're going around shopping for the cheapest price. Your deductible is the same no matter what. Shop for a contractor you trust to do the work, that you trust to be here and actually do the work. And so I told my family members, don't sign up with anyone. Wait till your insurance company comes back to you. So step one, that's what I would do. File your claim, let your insurance company come out and look at it. There's a lot of PAs and lawyers that might not agree with me on that, but you have to remember, I got into this trying to help contractors be profitable. And the flip side of that is it has to go quickly, right? You can't have 100% of your jobs tied up in legal. So if a legitimate contractor finds legitimate damage and a homeowner files a claim, that's where they start. See what your insurance company does, right? Don't destroy evidence. I can tell you, there's a couple of lawyers out there that get really mad because the contractors will think it's a slam dunk, jump the gun, re-roof the house, and not have good before photos, and they're stuck. So what I would tell a homeowner is be patient. Don't rush. Make sure you have temporary repairs that are going to last. Have your insurance company write an estimate and see if they're going to play it fair. And if they do, and your contractor is happy, you're done. Unfortunately, I only see when it goes wrong. I mean, by definition, alternative dispute resolution, I see the bad ones. So I have a little bit of a negative lens. But if it doesn't go well, you really have to be careful who you hire. You don't hire a family law lawyer to defend you in a murder trial, right? And that kind of stuff happens all the time out here. Is your PA qualified? Is your PA just going to sign it up and take it to appraisal anyway? Why not go straight to appraisal, right? A homeowner can hire an appraiser, but for them to know the nuances, that's where I would be fearful for them. I see a lot of appraisals in other states where scope is not allowed to be addressed, and contractors' supplement becomes the demand. If you screwed that up, I can't go after it. And if you're a roofer looking at the roof and you didn't look at anything else, and you talk that homeowner and you go into appraisal, you really hurt them. So
you bring out a very good point. And we see this a lot where a homeowner doesn't understand that they have to prove the loss, right? They have to show the damage. And sometimes they get excited. They start ripping things out. Maybe they take out a whole wall when only a portion of the wall should have been removed. But the insurance company, through their adjuster, never had the opportunity to actually see the extent of the damage and understand exactly what was there. And so that's where a dispute starts almost right away. And you get some contractors, again, they come in and they start removing things and changing things before they've had an opportunity to actually even document the damage and show it to the insurance adjuster. But
I'd like to make a slight amendment to my previous statement. So if you have a large loss and your insurance company and contractor are not in agreement early on, I would have a PA in a minute. I would check references. I would do my homework. I would ask for referrals of people who had a positive experience with that. I would not hire a PA that knocked on my door unless I did my due diligence. So if I have a large loss, I am not trusting my contractor to get the demand estimate right. If I have a small amount of money in dispute and my contractor is saying, sorry, I can't fix it for that, and there's no PA or lawyer that's going to take that claim because it's $5,000 in dispute, I would go to appraisal all day, twice on Sunday.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention for any property owners that are listening, when you experience a loss, especially a catastrophic event, photograph. Make a list of what the damages are. Get those to the insurance company as soon as possible, and don't throw anything out. Don't destroy anything until you've fully documented it. It's going to solve, so many issues. And the one thing that I always recommend to homeowners, if there's a hurricane that's 5 days away, you've got 5 days, 3 days, 4 days. Take photographs. Photograph the inside of the house, the outside of the house. Document everything pre-storm. It just makes things, so much easier after the storm, and creates a lot of avoids a lot of unnecessary disputes. What kind of problems do you see in the industry today?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this one, Brad. This could be a week-long series, but I think that most of the problems that you see is that you have insurance companies in business to make money, you have contractors in business to make money. Contractors rarely want to repair things because they want to offer a warranty. It's nothing worse than doing a repair on a roof and then having the homeowner call you out next month because the other side is leaking and they blame it on you and give you a negative review online. I understand both sides. The problem is it's become a cats and dogs fight. I don't see a lot of neutral. I don't see a lot of ethics either. I see if I have an advantage, I'm going to press it and I'm going to take it as far as I can. I would really say if I was going to give you a concrete, specific example, one of my biggest pet peeves as a policyholder appraiser is IA firms having the account for a major insurance company and sending out independent adjusters that have only ever done adjusting work as carrier side appraisers. They want to adjust the loss and they want to adjust it by best practices that an insurance company taught them. That's not appraisal, in my opinion. And there's probably a few appraisers listening to this who got a 25-page email from me on a Sunday morning when I was drinking coffee on a rant about how they weren't being neutral, they weren't impartial, they weren't doing justice to the appraisal process. I don't do that too much anymore. At first I tried to make a difference. Now I try to be effective. And what I find is when an opposing appraiser tells me that he has to run it up the flagpole or turn it into the office to see what they'll let him do, I don't argue with them anymore. It's just not worth it. And I have actually literally gone to the owner of an IA firm and said, hey, I'm tired of negotiating this loss through your intermediary. What lets you and me work it out? And we did. It's such a complete disaster, but a perfect example of the Wild West of non-commercial property appraisal.
So let's talk about impartiality and disinterested. How impartial is the appraiser for the insurance carrier or the appraiser for the policyholder supposed to be?
I think it's a myth. I mean, so let's break it down. I give insurance companies a little bit of grief just because I've been doing first party work for the last couple of years. But as a contractor, if my buddy is a contractor and he's representing my jobs at appraisal, how neutral is he?
That's right.
As a public adjuster, representing someone at appraisal, as a first party lawyer representing someone at appraisal, you bring all that baggage of the previous fights from the insurance companies to the table. I don't think there's a lot of neutral people, and that's part of what I want to close up with today is make a little bit of cry to action for that to happen, and why I'm excited about what you're doing, Brad, because the other side is just as corrupt. I give them a little more criticism because when an institution with deep pockets, when their business model is to be impartial in a situation that's supposed to be impartial, it rubs me the wrong way. An IA firm that only gets work from one insurance company, I've had that job. I know what happens if you don't give the company what they want. You don't get any more work.
It's so true, Mike, because we see this on both sides of the storm, as I call it, or both sides of the policy. And one thing that I have to say is I have been hired by many law firms on the plaintiff side. And I can tell you the law firms that I have worked with have been extremely impartial. And I'm very proud to work for them, right? They don't try to influence. They want to make sure that I have everything that I need. Everything that, if I ask for something and they don't have it, they'll try to get it, but nobody has ever tried to sway my opinion or my position. They want the facts. They want the truth, right? What really is going on out there. And the one thing that I've found, I've been in a couple, lawsuits where I have been an expert witness, and you go under depositions and in these things. And, it's very important that your credibility is at stake, right? You don't want to get caught and wrapped up in, not telling it exactly like it is. And there's been some cases where public adjusters, in my opinion, have not done the attorneys, the best that they could do because they didn't tell them all the facts. They didn't get the truth. I shouldn't even say the truth. They didn't get all of the facts, right? And so that may have made the attorney's decision or swayed their decision. And I don't think that's fair to anybody, whether it be the insurance carrier, the plaintiff attorney, right? Just deal with the facts, no outside, influence. This
Yeah.
is what it is, and no more.
And Brad, you're spot on. I mean, there's not a lot of professionals out there that are sticking their nose into the process and risking the consequences to that. But I will say that it's inherent, right? If you are, so take my example. I take a lot of referrals to homeowners for first party appraisal from their contractor when they feel like they're not getting a fair shake with the desk adjuster. So for me personally, if I go in and settle all of those below what Xactimate says just to get them done quickly, how many more referrals am I going to get? Not too
Right.
many, right? But on the flip side of that, I don't get a lot of referrals from people who are asking me to add things in there because it just doesn't happen. So I would really say that impartiality and personal ethics are the biggest question on the table for this industry right now. And when there's money on the table for both sides, it's always going to be an issue.
Well, it is, and I want to make sure that I make myself clear here. I talked about public adjusters, but you've seen it, and I've seen it definitely on the IA side, the independent adjuster. We see it all the time there too, where they're being influenced by best practices, as you call it. But we have to make sure that everybody, again, let's revisit that. It's best practices for the insurance carrier, not necessarily best practices on how to restore a property or what needs to be done, right? So, and that's a problem. And I think, in fact, I know that's where a lot of these disputes, begin, and then it gets pushed into appraisal versus a lawsuit, to try to solve some things that could have been solved if it was industry best practices. And what are the facts? What's the truth? And call it like it is.
I really do believe, I do a lot of appraisals where the opposing appraiser is an independent person. They're usually a retired adjuster from an insurance company, right? But they are truly no longer doing claim work. They're not working for an IA firm. The insurance company hired them directly. And I have much better success with those appraisers just because they're literally coming in from a neutral place most of the time. They still have a lens of the carrier side, but you can have a common sense conversation with them. I really would like to see IA firms no longer able to take appraisal work.
Yeah. Something that we haven't talked about, and I refer to it as gap insurance, underinsurance, where the agent didn't sell their client maybe things that they could have sold them. And more importantly, maybe they didn't explain to the client thoroughly enough so the client actually knows what they're buying. And I, as an insurance adjuster and working on the plaintiff side, for public adjusters, attorneys, and policyholders, I've seen it so many times where the policyholder didn't understand they didn't have a certain amount of coverage, or something wasn't, totally covered. And it's interesting because they said, well, my insurance agent told me that I was covered. And that's basically, and the thing is, when it falls back on the policyholder, it's really the policyholder's problem. They should have read the policy. If they didn't understand something, then they should have asked their insurance agent. But have you, on the carrier side and the policyholder side, have you found that also to be the case, where sometimes they just don't know what they have bought or have not bought?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, most people don't understand their policy until after it's too late, when they have a loss, and then they're learning the hard way what they do or don't have. I will say, doing first party appraisal or insured appraisal, the first part of the job is to put the phone on speaker and let them get it off their chest. So I hear it all, and some of them takes them 20 minutes to get it off their chest. But the crux of it is, it comes down to, most people at renewal, their deductible goes from 500 to 2%, and they don't know what that is. 2% of what, right? They don't realize the difference in those dollar amounts. They don't realize when they have an RCD policy, if you put a roof schedule on it, you're out of pocket multiple five figures if you have a loss on your roof, right? People
Right.
don't understand these things. I don't know how many, like me personally, I called the insurance company I wanted to be insured with directly and signed up with them, right? I'm a little bit more of an informed consumer, but how many people are going through an independent agent these days? I don't know. I have a feeling more people are calling off of a TV commercial and just signing up with the carrier directly. But I don't feel that people as a consumer are being educated well. I'll give you some real world examples. The last carrier work I did was in Louisiana, and this guy, and it was, this guy had literally lost everything twice in his lifetime. The first time he had an ACV policy, he did not make that mistake again. He was sad, but also so excited that he had an RCV policy. He had no idea he was only insured at policy limits for his mortgage. He was debt free with no property. And he thought RCV was the magic cure because everybody told him he shouldn't have had an ACV policy last time. Average consumers are not prepared to make those decisions. They need to be led by a licensed, competent professional.
And there's something else along those same lines. I believe an insurance agent on renewal should sit down and really talk, or maybe even go visit the property themselves. There's been several instances where the insured upgraded their home. Maybe they put on an addition. Maybe they did something, that really they should have more coverage, but they didn't tell their agent for two reasons. One, they forgot to tell them, right? Or they were afraid their rates were going to go up. But then when they have a big event, now it's a problem, and it's everybody's error except their own. So I think for policyholders that are listening, commercial or residential, when you make changes to your properties, talk to your insurance agent. Make sure you got it right. Make sure you have the same coverage, right? If you put in all granite countertops and all custom cabinets, right, and you brick up your fireplace, make sure it all changes the value of that home. Make sure you talk to the insurance agent to get the proper coverage. That's going to solve a lot of problems after a large event as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. You have to remember, a lot of people view insurance as a free ticket. When you have an open claim, was that, and again, some of it is sincerely, how many people go around and document all the damage on their house in minute detail? It's after an event that they notice it, right? And then if you and your adjuster aren't getting along or seeing it eye to eye, all of a sudden it becomes acrimonious. Then you have everything in the kitchen sink was broken in this storm. So I mean, again, working both sides, I understand how hard that can be. As a carrier, as an adjuster, you want to get it right, and sometimes that's very subjective.
Do you ever find that policyholders are a little confused on the role of an appraiser versus, if they've been working with a public adjuster, do they think it's the same thing as a public adjuster, or tell me what your experience has been? Do they get confused of who you are?
All the time. So again, I don't know too many homeowners that know what an appraisal, let alone an appraiser is. It's usually a referral from somebody to me. And the first thing I do is call them up, explain to them who I am, what I do, how I think I can help, and what the terms of our engagement are. And so every one of those people have that conversation. When I show up at their property, I can't tell you, it's like it never even registered. Actually the last one I did, I had to explain to the opposing appraiser that I was not the contractor because the insured was saying how much he didn't like his last contractor and how much happier he was with his new one. And we were like, great, who's your contractor? And he was like, you guys. And I was like, what? No. Right. Obviously didn't go well with the opposing appraiser.
It's so interesting. I'm very detailed in my explanation of, like you are, who I am, what I'm going to do, how I can help, right? And I even touch base on a public adjuster. I am not a public adjuster. I am not an attorney, right? And I've had the policyholder then tell the insurance carrier or the other appraiser that I'm a public adjuster. I'm their public adjuster. They hired me as a public. Not that you got to do damage control, but now you find yourself explaining to the insurance carrier and the other appraiser, I'm not their public adjuster. I am the appraiser. I was appointed by them. But it is so interesting. Again, even though you have these conversations, people forget, or they still don't understand what it is that you're explaining to them.
It's confusing, Brad. There's no getting around it. right? I will literally drill down in a group setting with a group of contractors who have been doing this for decades,
Yeah.
exactly what their options are. And 10 minutes later, they don't have the vocabulary right, or they don't understand. They're sending me something that clearly is inappropriate for me, right? So from that perspective, there's just like, that's why I said good luck when you said, what would you advise a homeowner before? It's complicated. You really need to get a skilled advisor, or your odds of success are low. How
Right.
many people in Florida wish they had found you instead of where they are now?
Right. Right.
With you,
Yeah.
right?
And I tell you what is interesting. I want to go back to the carrier side too. When you talk about, best practices, I've actually had inside adjusters as I'm the appraiser for the policyholder. I've had inside adjusters ask me to send in all of my W-9 forms and all this information so they can put my name on the check. And I and I have to explain to them, I have to tell them the difference. I'm not a public adjuster. I'm not an attorney. I am the appraiser. You do not put appraisers' names on checks when you send the money out to the policyholder. So, I think there's some confusion inside the carrier's office as well. And and I wonder, is it because after a catastrophe, they're feverishly hiring people to fill jobs to handle these claims that maybe aren't properly trained as well?
I think that a lot of insurance companies have appraisal departments now, but no, I mean, there's definitely adjusters out there that don't understand appraisal, and they will pick up the phone and call me as the insured appraiser and try to negotiate the claim with me. And it's clear that they don't know, and I'll
Right.
politely redirect them. I think you should ask your supervisor for some help. This is highly inappropriate. Um, any large growing organization is going to have training issues on the front line.
Do you think that some of the confusion comes into an AOB? And maybe you can explain to our listeners what an AOB is, and their names are put on the checks, who has an AOB. So let's talk about that for a minute. Do you work with a lot of contractors that have AOBs?
Enough that I understand it, but no, I'm in Texas, and that's never been an option here. Having clients in Florida, Colorado, and other states, it does come up from time to time. They're gone in Florida now. I agree with last week's position that they were a problem that needed to be fixed. But again, it's a tool that I think was abused. The tool by itself wasn't the problem; it's how it was applied.
Sure.
I like it. I mean, I like it in theory. You have an insurance company here, you have a contractor here. They both are at odds of what needs to be done. You got a homeowner or an insured in between who doesn't understand what's going on. And for them to have to try and get stuck in the middle, it's very simple for the claim to be assigned, the benefit of the claim assigned to someone else. Then that person can see it through. When that person abuses that power, that's what you get in Florida. And unfortunately, I think that power swing has gone a little too far the other way. Longer conversation for later, but I
Right.
think
It's
that,
a whole another discussion.
yeah.
But so do you work as an umpire as well, or just an appraiser?
I don't do a lot of umpire work. Remember, I got into this with a very specific goal. I wanted to solve a problem of minor disputes not being worth most professionals' time or attention, and I wanted to see if I could fill that niche very effectively. And I got into first party appraisals as a requirement because supplementing wasn't effective. And my goal wasn't to be an appraiser or an umpire, but I really needed to understand it from the street level in order to go where I want to next. So would I turn down an umpire assignment? Of course not. But do I go out and advertise that shingle? No.
So on a appraisal panel, when you've engaged the umpire for their services, what has been your experience how the umpire actually ends up coming up with a fair decision? Does he split the baby, so to speak? Do they really dig into one side or the other? And kind of walk me through what your experience has been with umpires.
A mixed bag. When I'm doing an appraisal, especially in an area I've never worked before, I would say at least half of my time is spent on umpire research. As a first party appraiser, if you're just picking a person off the list that looks good on the CV, there's gamemanship going on here on both sides. So picking a neutral, competent umpire is the most important part in appraisal, in my opinion, because if one side has an umpire that they know is their buddy or sees it the way they see it, and the negotiations aren't going well, it's going to go to them immediately, and you're going to lose. So for me, there's a lot of great umpires out there. There's also a lot of really horrible ones. The worst ones I've seen is where an appraiser I know picked somebody that was working for that carrier. That settlement didn't go the way he wanted it to, and or that negotiation didn't go with the opposing appraiser the way he wanted, and it went to an umpire that immediately sided with the other side. He sent out a signed award with no discussion, no position, nothing. That's the horror stories you see. You gotta get umpire right.
So do you have any feeling on some of this new state legislation that's going on? There's been a lot of new legislation in Florida. What are your thoughts or comments, and how is that affecting your business?
It's not affecting me too much. I will say that state legislation is going to change. If assignment of benefits had been part of my business model, I would be in a bad spot. I'm glad it wasn't. But I will say this: if appraisal keeps getting abused the way it is, I think it's going to go the way of assignment of benefits. It's just a tool that has to be used with some common sense and with some ethics, or it's going to go away. As far as state legislation goes, I know Colorado has some changes coming up on how that might affect appraisal. I know Florida was real dicey for a while if you had to have an IA or a PA license, and it looks like they punted on that. I will say that I'm really curious to see what the next chapter in Florida brings.
In this conversation, you brought up ethics a couple of times. So you see that ethics could be a big problem in this industry on both sides, just not one side.
Mm-hmm. Oh, without a doubt. You know what? If you don't mind me reading the note, I found this the other day and it really stuck out to me as really the crux of the problem. I'll paraphrase because I don't know where I found it the other day, but in one of the Texas Supreme Court rulings, the judge came down and was discussing, the claims process and said it's adversarial by nature. And until the both sides agree and pay out on a claim, it's going to be adversarial by nature. This is capitalism. There's people who are trying to make money for their shareholders. There's people who are trying to pay their mortgage and their truck payment and be profitable on a roof. It's going to be adversarial when there's money involved. I feel like the cats and dogs piece of it has gotten way out of control.
So ethics can be a problem at both ends of the spectrum. It can be a problem on the roof, right? But it can also be a problem in our state houses.
Oh, without a doubt. For 100% fact. So, and again, I've seen bad behavior on both sides. I found out that we were getting appraisal work from a company that we were also doing their adjusting work. It was going around the back end, but that was the most egregious thing I could ever imagine. I also have seen contractors who fabricate damage and think that that's okay because they're up against a big bad wolf. That's not okay either. Right. And I understand how everybody gets where they're at. There's so much acrimonious negative behavior out there, but who drew first blood, chicken or egg? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's irrelevant. If we don't start doing better, what do you get? Big government, right? Like at the end of the day, it's going to start getting regulated. I know nobody in your panel wanted their fees regulated, but look at what happened in real estate when mortgage brokers were hiring the appraiser in order to be able to pump up the value on a property for a cash out refinance. Anybody in Florida in 2008, 9, or whenever that was knows how that turned out, right? What they don't realize is today, the bank has a pool of appraisers they pull from. If bad behavior keeps happening on both sides, it's not quite an apples to apples comparison because banks still want to lend money. They just are interested in the valuation being accurate. With property repair dispute resolution, there's no neutral party. They're acrimonious by nature. So who's going to be in charge of that third party pool and who's going to set their fees? If we don't fix it ourselves, it's going to be taken away.
Well, the sad thing is when there's money involved, people don't look, sometimes they don't look at things clearly, right? And I think,
Yeah.
from a very simplistic viewpoint, the policyholder is what this whole conversation is about, right?
Mhm.
Yes, the insurance company, is there to sell the insurance for that policyholder, but the fight is going all around the policyholder. They went through a very, very stressful and traumatic and dramatic situation, right? An event. And hopefully they don't go through it more than once in their life. But those that do, I have sat down in front of grown men and women
Mhm.
that have broken into tears because they are so stressed out and so frustrated. All they want to do is to put their home back the way that it was before the storm or the fire or the flood, hit them. And
Mhm.
that's all they want, and they're looking to help from their insurance company. Most policyholders trust their insurance company, they trust their insurance agent, right?
Yeah.
Until they find out they're only going to get half the money to put the whole house back. you know it's so maddening and it's so frustrating. As an insurance adjuster, I've walked into so many situations where you just have to sit and listen and
Mhm.
let people explain their frustration a little bit. And on the other side, on the policyholder, side is their advocate. You've got to do the same thing. We are all there, both sides of this storm, both sides of this policy. We are there for one reason: to help the policyholder that's going through a really tough time, right? The tough thing is, like you pointed out, now with the money involved and the stockholders are involved and everybody has their financial interest, they're worried about themselves instead of the actual client, the
Yeah.
policyholder.
It didn't used to be this way, Brad. It really didn't. I mean, if you think about it, maybe I sound like my grandpa, but I remember when milk was, 99 cents a gallon. But there used to be adjusters and contractors that would get on a property and work out what needed to be done, and a check was written.
Right.
I mean, everybody knows that how it used to be. But now, in the never-ending quest for being more profitable, or whatever started this snowballing effect, that's just not where we're at today. So from that perspective, there's two things that I would like to see do better. I see spaghetti estimating on the contractor side or the PA side or the legal side all the time. And I understand it. I know why people do it. If you're going into appraisal or court on an estimate that you wrote, and it's going to be mediated, and the mediator has no experience, and they're going to split the baby, did you make your client or that property whole if you came in with a dead on fair estimate and the other side's going to be down here? Spaghetti estimating is a problem. You can't inflate estimates hoping to bring it back down. I started this business showing people how to estimate exactly what is owed, and if it's not paid, how to document and demand that it get paid. From that perspective, I got into appraisal to further that. But I will say that if I know that opposing appraiser and that insurance company require a court-appointed umpire, and that estimate is going to either be agreed with or split, that's a real, you want to talk about being ethical, that's a tough one, right? You're choosing between compromising your ethics or leaving your client not whole. And that's a systematic problem that needs to be resolved. Um, on the flip side, I would like to see carriers that, if contractors are overestimating, carriers are way underestimating. You deployed to Florida. Every IA that deployed to Florida after Hurricane Ian knows the 25% rule, or at least I hope they did, right? So if
Right.
a roof is more than 25% damaged and it's over X number of years old, you have to redo the whole thing. You can't repair it. When you go on a roof that 75% of it is gone and you get a repair estimate from the insurance company, how do you think that insured and contractor should respond? We strenuously object. They're mad, right? And then you get PAs and lawyers, and now that they're mad, are they going to ask for exactly what is owed? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like when you're wrong, you feel justified. And when you feel justified, you can justify a lot of bad behavior. That's where our industry is at today. I'd like to see both people stop over and underestimating. Let's actually try to get it right.
You know, it's interesting because we talk about two big problems, which is self-interest, but another problem is trust, right? And so what is so interesting is the policyholder, they get to a point where maybe I can't trust my adjuster. Wait a minute, maybe I can't trust the public adjuster. I've got a real problem. You know, I read all these things about bad contractors. Maybe I can't trust my contractor, right? And then the contractor some contractors have a problem trusting that the homeowner is even going to pay them, right? The public adjuster doesn't trust the independent. Nobody trusts anybody. It's so ridiculous. And here's the deal. Sometimes trust is because somebody maybe has an ethical issue, an ethics problem, right?
Yeah.
But then the trust could also be a result because the person doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, so now it's not you don't trust their ethics, you trust their knowledge on the situation. They're hired to come in and look at a property and determine what the damage is and put a value to it. And if they don't know what they're talking about, it's not that you can't trust them because of their ethics. You can't trust them because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, competent and disinterested is, I mean, we don't get a lot of direction in appraisal. That's where it starts. Who's the judge of competent? You know, nobody, the consumer.
That's right. Well, Mike, this has been robust. It's exciting. I'm glad you joined me. Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I want to leave the door open to have you back again on some more topics. And again, I appreciate all of your comments and your input.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate what you're doing, and let's keep bridging that gap. There's a sweet spot in the middle. Everybody can get along.
That's right. All right. Well, you have a good day, Mike.
Thanks, you too. Bye now.
Can you feel it coming in the air?